Welcome, dear viewer. I hope you are having a wonderful night. Tonight, I'll be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. I hope you are warm and ready. Let's begin. When I was young, I used to sleepwalk. My mother would tell me these stories about myself that I would have no memory of. She said it first started when I was around 5 or 6 years old. She had me to bed one night. Then, around an hour or so later, she heard a noise coming from down the hallway. She closed the book she'd been reading and went to investigate. She told me that she found me sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to eat. At first, she asked me what I was doing, and after not receiving a response, she approached. Upon closer inspection, she realized that I wasn't awake to respond. She stood there and watched me for some time, as she herself hadn't actually seen a sleepwalker before. She said that I sat there acting as if I were eating. Then I would stop and turn to the chair to my right. To her, it appeared like I was having a conversation with someone, though she mentioned that I wasn't speaking any words, more like slight whimpers and groans. I'd then laugh quietly in my seat, then continue eating. After nearly 20 minutes of this, I got up from my chair, took a few steps, and laid down on the floor. My mother then woke me up and told me that I needed to go back to bed. Well, I don't remember this interaction. She told me I was incredibly confused as I thought I was in bed. She led me by the hand back to my bedroom and tucked me back in. A few months later, this happened again. My mother had gotten up in the middle of the night to get something to drink. As she walked into the kitchen, she nearly jumped out of her skin when she saw a silhouette of someone standing in front of the window. She switched on the kitchen light and saw that it was me, that I was standing in front of the glass, motionless. She walked over to me, asking what I was doing. Of course, when she got closer, she saw that my eyes were shut. Apparently, I stood at that window for nearly a half hour before turning and walking back to my bedroom. My mom followed closely to make sure I went back to bed, and sure enough, I did. It was odd for me to hear about these things I was doing after I'd fallen asleep. The concept that my body would move when I had no conscious control over it made me nervous. My mother found it somewhat amusing, but I didn't seem to think so. Over the following year, I only sleepwalked a few times. Most of them just ended up with me getting up from my bed and wandering into another room before falling asleep on the floor. My mother would usually find me the next morning and wake me up. Then, after nearly a year had passed, my mother had gotten up one night, and while she was passing by my room, she decided to peek in on me. When she opened my door, I was nowhere to be found. She wandered around the entire house, but couldn't find me in any of the rooms. Then, as she was walking through the living room, something out of the corner of her eye caught her attention. She saw the vague outline of someone standing outside underneath one of the street lamps. As she turned to get a better look, she quickly realized it was me. She threw open the door and dashed outside. I was apparently standing in the center of the road all by myself. Luckily, our street was on a dead end and didn't see very much traffic after 9:00 p.m. She called out my name as she ran towards me, but I didn't seem to react at all. As she slowed her approach, she saw that I was gesturing with my arms, as if I were having a conversation with someone. She walked up to me and grabbed my wrist. When she did this, I apparently began to freak out. I started to shout and fight against her as if she were some sort of beast attempting to devour me. A minute or two later, I had woken up and snapped out of my frenzy. When I came, I asked my mother where I was, and she calmly explained that I had walked outside while I was sleeping. I apologized to her, and she led me back inside. In the months that followed, I would sleepwalk almost every other night. It had gotten so bad that my mom had taken me to a few mental health professionals. Each of them told my mother that sleepwalking is quite common in children and that I should eventually grow out of it. They just gave her a list of things to be aware of if she finds me sleepwalking again, such as not waking me up in the middle of it or gently coaxing me back to bed, etc. These explanations didn't really put my mother at ease. She wanted something a bit more concrete, so she kept searching until she came across a therapist who specialized in sleep disorders. It's such a bizarre part of my life that I barely remember it. All the evidence I've had that I used to sleepwalk all seemed to come from my mother telling me such. I apparently spoke with this doctor numerous times and visited him at least twice a week for 3 months straight. Then one day, my mother stopped taking me to see him, and according to her, I hadn't had a sleepwalking episode since. Nearly 15 years have passed since then, and it all just seemed more like a dream than a memory, as if it happened to somebody else. And I had just heard about it. Of course, I believed my mom. I doubt she would make up something like that. It just never really clicked that I had this problem when I was younger. That was until I was helping my mom clean out some of her things from her basement. She was going through all her storage and getting rid of a bunch of old stuff. While I was pulling boxes out of the rafters, something clattered to the floor. It was a thick manila file folder that hit the ground with a thud. Hoping I didn't break anything of importance, I stopped what I was doing and picked up the folder. After glancing at it, I noticed on the front that it had my name on it with some dates. I looked around to make sure my mom wasn't nearby, and I took the folder into the back of my pants. After finishing up, I told her I'd talk to her later, and I headed back home to my house. When I got inside, I tossed my jacket on the couch and pulled out the folder. As I peeled open one end and slid the large file out, my eyes darted across the front of it. It was a record of my time with the therapist. I guess he must have given my mother a copy of these to keep. All of the entries inside were from each of the days I had gone to visit him. Most of them were just logs of the sessions, as well as a few notes he had taken throughout. One of the last entries, however, drew my attention. It said that the therapist was going to conduct some type of hypnotherapy on me. He had me lay down on a lounge chair and began telling me to relax while continuously asking me specific questions. He asked me what I dreamed about, and my answer had been written down. I told him that I dreamed of my friend. Reading this, I had no idea who I was talking about. The therapist then asked me to describe this friend of mine. I told him that he was much taller than me. Though for a child, that wasn't saying much. His body always seemed to be hunched over. He had long black hair that fell down to his shoulders. His arms were extremely long, like two snakes attached to the shoulders. Each of his fingers came to a point like sharpened knives. The therapist asked me to tell him what his face looked like, and apparently, I struggled to describe it. I told him that his face was blurry, like it was covered in TV static. When the therapist pressed further, apparently, I sat up in the chair, still asleep, and told the therapist to look at him for himself. I then pointed behind the therapist, and when he turned, he saw nobody there. He jotted down some notes and then asked me what my friend wanted. I told him that he wants to take me somewhere far away so we can both play together forever. He made another note, and then, through a series of careful statements, he rid my mind of negative dreams. Well, that's what he wrote down anyway. Since that day, I have slept peacefully without any more sleepwalking incidents. All those memories I had from the early years of my life seemed hazy, and I've nearly forgotten about them all. Despite not knowing anything about those statements I made, I couldn't help but feel a bit of familiarity with the description of this friend of mine. As I closed the file, I sighed, thinking about all the things I'd said in the notes. I looked at the clock, which read 10:20, 3 p.m. As I stood up from my chair, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned and looked out my window. For the briefest of seconds, I thought I had spied someone standing outside. Someone is looking at me. Someone tall with long arms and long black hair. Someone with a blurry face. I blinked my eyes, and when I opened them again, they were gone. I wanted to rationalize that what I had just seen was just a product of reading these files. My tired mind had simply conjured this hallucination. But for some reason, I can't seem to shake this feeling that those weren't simply dreams I had been experiencing when I was a kid. They were something much more than dreams, something much more sinister. I can feel my eyelids starting to become heavier by the minute, and for the first time in my life, I'm worried about what will happen if I fall asleep again. My husband is not my husband. My husband is not my husband. I have been with my husband for 30 years. We fell in love in high school. That whole cliche. We live in a small town in Illinois with no kids but 3 cats. For the past week or so, he has been acting strange, and at first I was really worried. I thought he didn't love me anymore. It started with him not talking to me as much. Usually, he tells me everything. We are best friends. I thought maybe he just wasn't feeling well, and that work was stressing him out. Then he was saying things that weren't right. He was saying to his boss, Jess, at work that he was getting married. But his boss's name is Kevin, and he's an old guy, about 80, 5, and widowed. But maybe Kevin retired and this just took over, and he forgot to tell me. It was just, overall, giving me a bad feeling. I'm writing this as an example, to tell people that what the government is saying is true. I never trusted the government, but most sane people don't. Today started normal. The sun rose at 6:52 a.m. after I had already gotten out of bed. It's Saturday, but I am so used to getting up early for work that I just get up early every day. I made coffee and sat on the couch to turn on the news. My husband usually gets up around 8 or so on the weekends, so I usually just sit around, read or watch TV until he's up, and then we make breakfast and decide what we are doing. This past week of him being weird made me on edge, so when we walked out of the bedroom, wide awake and dressed at 5 a.m., my fear for the day started. Good morning, babe. He didn't ever call me babe. He called me Donut as an ode to our first date at a cafe, where I ordered a donut, and he said that a donut isn't a good lunch. Morning. You're up early. I smiled anyway, let him kiss me, and then he disappeared into the kitchen. When he was out of sight, I returned my attention to the news. And when I did, a message was on the bottom of the screen. If you believe that your loved one is not who they are supposed to be, remain calm and leave your home immediately. I stare as the message continues scrolling to the bottom of the screen. And then it changes. You are not crazy. They are not your loved one. You are in danger. I blinked a few times. The second Jacob walked into the living room, the message stopped scrolling. I am going to shower, and then we can go out for breakfast, he says. He showers exclusively at night, and we never go out for breakfast anymore. Okay, hun. I smile, cupping my mug in my hands. When he turns the corner, my eyes snap back to the screen. Leave your home immediately and find the officer at the end of the street. We know who they are. This has to be some kind of practical joke. The government will remove the machine in place of your loved one. We are working on finding your family. What the fuck? Okay. At that point, I was scared. Either it was a joke or I was in danger, and I didn't want to find out the hard way. So, in my bathrobe and slippers, I turned the TV off and set my half cup of coffee down. The shower was still running. But when I stood and made my way to the front door, it stopped, not even 2 minutes after it turned on. I stopped 2 steps from the door. When I turned around, Jacob was right there. I jumped. He had a very over-exaggerated, worried look on his face, almost unnatural. You startled me, I laughed, my heart racing. Is this my husband? I kept trying to examine him, but the way his body and face looked was so unsettling, I couldn't stare. Where were you going? He asks, monotone. Nowhere. I thought I heard someone on the porch. God, I'm glad I can think fast. because he believed it. Oh, is there someone out there? In the next 3 moments, I realized that it wasn't a joke. Because when Jacob turned to go to the front door, that's the only way I can explain it. It was like watching a video of an AI on TikTok or something. His arm was in one position, and then in 2 milliseconds, it was behind his back. His head tilted to the side, and then his head went back and his arm was back at his side. And then he was normally walking to the door. My heart was racing. I needed to get out. That was a quick shower, I said, swallowing hard. Yeah, I was sweating last night and wanted to rinse off. That's a lie. He is a cold sleeper, and last night it was freezing in the bedroom. I still don't know how I got out. After all the small talk, I think that thing realized that I knew, and I think it tried to kill me. All I know is that I didn't drink the smoothie, and I got out. Now that I am sitting with hundreds or thousands of other people in our town mall, everyone is quiet. Everyone had a traumatizing experience. All they have told us so far is that it was a failed experiment the government was working on that gained its own intelligence and has been multiplying, replacing our loved ones. It's not just our town. It's the whole country. If you are reading this and you think your loved one is not actually your spouse, kid, or friend, leave immediately. Find the officer. Get to safety. This is not a joke. They told us that the death count in just this first week is over 1 million. These things are unbelievably smart. Please listen. Get out. Get out right now. I woke up at 3 a.m. to an Amber Alert notification on my phone. Struggling to find my phone, I turn on the lamp on my nightstand to find it on the floor. The Amber Alert notification says, "Do not look at the moon. Please sleep and stop looking out the door." I was a little freaked out by this. What could possibly be wrong with looking at the moon? I became even more confused when I found out I had thousands of other notifications. My eyes grew wider, and I awakened more. I unlocked my phone to find WhatsApp had a little red circle above it, saying 99s. All of my social media apps had over 100 notifications. One of the notifications said, "Look at the moon. It's beautiful outside." It must have been someone who had gotten the notification and wanted to creep someone out. That's when I found out another notification had said, "Look at the moon. It's beautiful outside." That's weird. Another person said the same thing. I scrolled through all of the notifications. To my surprise, they all said the same thing. "Look at the moon. It's beautiful outside." I was freaked out. I wanted to look outside out of curiosity, but I was so creeped out that I didn't. Maybe my phone was hacked. I decided to text my friend to see if he was in the same scenario I was in. However, when I opened up his DMs, all of the previous messages were gone, and there was only one thing on screen. "Look at the moon. It's beautiful outside." I was bewildered. I had to be hacked, right? I texted him anyway. "Dude, what's going on? Did you get that Amber Alert notification too?" About a minute later, he texted back, "Look at the moon. It's beautiful outside." That made me feel less like my phone was being hacked. The Amber Alert had told me to just fall back asleep, and so I did. Well, I didn't, but I tried to. I felt haunted by those notifications. I just couldn't sleep. Finally, I got another notification. "It's the moon thing, isn't it?" I mumbled under my breath. When I opened my phone, I was surprised to see a notification from my other friend. "We'll call him. Dave texted me." It wasn't the moon thing. It was him saying, "Hey, dude, you up? I got a weird Amber Alert notification, and thousands of people are texting me." My eyes grew, and I quickly sat up to text him back. "Yeah, you getting the moon thing too?" I texted quickly. He responded, "Yeah, I haven't looked at the moon." "Have you?" I responded, "No, I don't want to." "I'm curious though." He replied, "Don't look at it. I don't know what could happen. but it's certainly a bad thing. I decided to turn on my lights and close the curtains, just in case. "You know I'm a curious guy," I texted. "I feel like I have to." He kept telling me, "Don't look at it. It could be bad." He knows that I'm a curious guy. I'm also a risky person. He's also really non-serious. He always dared me to take these risks and sees me as a daredevil, which is also what I see myself as. However, this time, he isn't. That's how you know he's dead serious. What could possibly happen if I looked at it? Is it so bright it'll blind my eyes? "There's no light out there," I texted. "This time, I'm serious," he replied. I couldn't take it. My curiosity was beaming. I turned off the phone. I set it down. I walked to the window. I opened the blinds. I opened the window and peeked my head out, looking up. The moon was beautiful. A pretty blue and yellow color made it glow. It was almost a rainbow. The moon was bigger and brighter than usual. It was the most beautiful thing I've seen in my life. My phone kept pinging. I walked to it with a huge grin and unfocused eyes. It was Dave saying, "Dude, why are you responding?" "Did you look at the moon?" I responded, texting him back using nothing but my index finger. Key by key, I said, "Look at the moon. It's beautiful outside." My friend and I have known each other since high school. We ended up going to the same college. We moved to the same neighborhood and started working at the same place. It was all coincidental, but it allowed us to be close friends, even though we had nothing in common but life and coincidences. At one point, about 4 years ago, she changed jobs. First, we had regular lunches, but then I also moved out of the neighborhood and into a house in the suburbs. So without daily interactions at work and without living close to each other, we just drifted apart. For a few years, we only talked on birthdays and major holidays, wishing each other well, updating each other on random life events, etc. This year, for my birthday, she wrote me and told me she's buying a house. Again, coincidentally, it was very close to where I had moved, about 10 minutes by car. She invited me to her new house party and then messaged me after thanking me for coming. A few days later, she messaged me again, and soon after, we started getting back in touch. As this was happening in mid-June, and with summer just around the corner, we didn't have time to see each other again before I went on holiday. But we were texting each other nearly daily. She told me she had a cat and sent me pictures. It was a gorgeous little rescue. She was black all over, except for her paws, which were white. It looked like she was wearing shoes, so my friend named her Boots. From the pictures and videos, Boots was loving, cuddly, and sweet. So when I came back from holiday, I didn't think twice before I agreed to stop by my friend's house every evening and look after the cat while she went on holiday for a week too. I even proposed to take her over at my place, but since I had a dog and my friend didn't know how Boots would react, we agreed that I'd just drop by every night for a few hours, as my schedule allowed it. As her flight was departing before mine would have landed, we didn't manage to meet, and she couldn't give me her house keys, so she gave me the code to her garage. I could very easily enter like that, and the job was simple enough. Check that the cat had sufficient dry food available. Feed her a little satchel of wet food every evening, change her water, and clean her litter. I was also to spend an hour or so just cuddling or playing with her. Simple and adorable, right? Wrong. The first night went smoothly enough. I got there at around 8:30, around Boots' dinner time. She ate her wet food really well, and then we played for a while. "What's your favorite toy, Boots?" I asked her jokingly. She looked me in the eyes, ran into the bedroom, and came back with an orange plastic mouse. I was taken aback by the cat's ability to understand my question, but I assumed my friend was talking to her all the time, and the phrase favorite toy in relation to that specific mouse had come by a few times. The cat was associating. I replaced the water and the dry food, cleaned the litter box, and then laid down on her couch to read a little. Boots came over and started making biscuits on the blanket, which I used as a cover. I took some pictures and sent them to my friend, who was pleased with my service. Boots, loving all the attention, ear scratches, and sweet talk, laid on my stomach and started purring, fast asleep. "What's the smell?" I said, trying to dissipate the odor with my hand. "What a farty butthole you have, miss." "Very unbecoming for a lady," I argued. The cat meowed at me, as if to excuse herself or protest, and then got off the couch. "Aw, come on, Bootsy. I didn't mean it," I argued back. I put my book down and checked the time. It was well past 11 p.m. Pretty late, I thought. I packed my things, massaged my friend that I was on my way, made sure the garage door closed properly, and off I went. The next night, things went just as smoothly, with a very similar routine. Little food, little play, some chilling on the couch. Boots, again, came to lie down on my chest. And again, that god-awful smell. "Aye, what is this?" I reacted, trying to grab the cat and bring her closer to my nose to see where exactly it was coming from. I didn't know whether cats needed their anal glands checked like dogs did, but I was guessing this one might. But Boots, as elusive as any cat, ran away again, meowing at me from across the room. "Fine, miss. I have to go anyway," I responded. The third night is when things got weird. That terrible smell hit me as soon as I entered the house. "Oof, oof," I exclaimed, and quickly texted my friend to see whether it was okay to stop the wet food. It smelled strongly of sulfur, like when my French bulldog eats cheese. Something needed to be done, I'd argued in the texts. This poor cat's stomach needed some sort of management. My friend asked me if the poop was okay in the little box, and sure enough, it was. She suggested I reduce the portion but not worry too much about it. Apparently, Boots can get a little gassy when stressed. I just opened the windows to air the place a little, making sure that Boots didn't attempt to escape. Then, I proceeded to do the regular stuff. Change the water, top up her dry food, and then go lounge on the couch. This time, Boots didn't join me. Instead, she stood across the room from me and just stared. For the whole time I was there, she just stared, her piercing green eyes never blinking. I felt the need to end my evening short, so at 5 minutes after 10, I bid Boots adieu and left. The whole way home, I kept thinking of the eerie feeling of Boots and me sitting in the darkness, her staring me down, and me trying and failing to read. I wanted to check with my friend, but I didn't know how to put it in words. "Your cat is creepy and stinks." That just sounded like a terrible thing to say to a pet owner. The next night, I got to the house. The place was completely dark, even though I always left the light on the staircase leading from the garage to upstairs, as well as the hallway light upstairs. My first thought was that the fuse box tripped, but when I flipped the light switch, it worked just fine. Strange, I thought, not minding it too much. I went upstairs and tended to the cat's business. I also opened the windows as the sulfur smell persisted. This time, Boots did not greet me at the door. Instead, she was on the opposite side of the house, at the bottom of the stairs that led to the attic. "Oopsie, dinner," I called at her, but she just stared back. "Boots, come here," I tried again, walking towards her. As I started approaching her, Boots made her way up towards the attic. I didn't feel the need to follow her. "All right, you know where your food is. You'll find me on the couch," I yelled from the bottom of the stairs. The house also felt unnaturally cold. I went to check the thermostat, and sure enough, it dropped a few degrees. I texted my friend, who just told me not to worry about it. I shrugged and went to the bedroom to look for a thicker blanket or duvet for myself in her wardrobe. As I was snooping around, I heard something right above me. My heart stopped. It sounded like tiny footsteps. Then I remembered that it was probably in the attic, and that's Boots walking around, maybe chasing a rat or two. I know cats are supposed to be fantastic at being quiet and light on their feet. Boots was a bit on the heavy side, And well, cats, these days just don't have the same instincts as before, I assumed. After finding a proper duvet, I made myself a hot tea and cuddled with a book on the couch. About 20 minutes later, Boots came back downstairs, moving around the couch. "Come on, silly goose. I'm sorry I called you a stinky." "Who?" I said, looking at her. As if on command, she jumped up, and I noticed something in her mouth. "What's that, Bootsy?" I asked her, trying to get closer to her. "What do you have there?" Now, I know you all cat owners anticipated what's coming next, but I did not expect it. Boots came slowly closer, and as I stretched out my hand, she placed a dead rat in it. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but the instant the realization hit me, I yelped so loudly and shuddered so violently that I yeeted the rat all the way across the room. Lo, and behold, the little shit wasn't dead, just stunned. The moment it hit the floor, it snapped awake and bolted. Boots followed in its tracks, but this time the rat was too fast, and the cat couldn't quite catch it. It seemed like there was a rat hole in the kitchen somewhere, and it managed to make its great escape, at least for now. I texted my friend the whole incident, suggesting that she might want to look for the hole and cover it up. Again, she replied, telling me simply not to worry about it. Well, if she wasn't concerned, I sure wouldn't be. In the meantime, Boots proceeded to eat her wet food, and I went back to my book. After dinner, she came back to the couch and cuddled at my feet. The sulfur smell did not seem to leave her. 3 more days and Mommy's home, I told her, feeling bad for how stressful this must be for her to make her so gassy. She turned around and looked at me with her piercing green eyes, and just then I heard some more footsteps above us. Boots got startled, and her pupils dilated to the point that the green in her eyes was a mere thin outline for the black pupils. Freaking rats, I told myself. But I knew better. Those were too heavy to be rat footsteps. I felt a strong urge to get out, and I checked the time. "Oh my, it's almost 12, Bootsy. I must leave you," I said to her, grabbing my things in a rush. As I was walking towards the stairs that lead to the garage, I could hear the stomping tracing my steps from above, so I rushed for the door, feeling immensely relieved once outside. The next night, I contemplated whether I should be going or not for a long time, but I couldn't go. It didn't seem fair, neither to the cat nor to my friend, whom I'd promised. So I decided to reach a compromise with myself. Go, feed the cat, clean the litter, replace the water, and leave. Then, on Saturday, I could afford to go during the day, and maybe that would feel less eerie, and I could play with her for a longer time to make up for this day. So I did exactly that, or attempted to at least. I got there. Boots was waiting for me like the first few nights. "Hi, baby girl," I said as she rubbed herself against my legs and heard. "I'm sorry, but this will be a short visit." This time, the footsteps started very early into my visit. Get in, feed the cat, and get out, I told myself. Stomp I could hear above me as I was preparing Boots' dinner. My fingers were shaking, and I could feel my pulse increasing. Stomp, stomp. "Here you go," I said, placing the food bowl down and trying my hardest to ignore whatever was going on in the attic. I went to the bathroom to clean the litter, and the footsteps followed above me. Stomp, stomp. I went back to the kitchen to check if Boots had finished her food and to replace her water. But this time, the footprints didn't follow. Instead, they seemed to be going in the opposite direction, towards stairs. This couldn't be good. My brain was trying to get me to move towards the stairs that lead to the garage, but my gut was telling me to look for salt. Stomp, stomp. I could hear still, further in the distance. I started opening cupboards and searching frantically for anything. Plain salt, a salt and pepper shaker, a bag of salt, anything. I found a Himalayan salt grinder and started grinding it on the counter. God, I hoped it would be good enough. The stomping stopped. I, too, stopped grinding and held my breath so that I wouldn't disturb the stillness and soundlessness that fell upon the house. Creak, creak. I shuddered. The steps were coming down the stairs. I had no doubt about it. I dragged whatever salt I could grind into my palm and made a run for the stairs, keeping my eyes closed at all times. As I reached the door and fumbled to find the doorknob in between squints, I noticed that the lights started flickering vigorously. The footsteps were now making their way down the hallway behind me. I started praying and throwing salt over my shoulder. I realized that I didn't know the words to Our Father in English and started crying as I fumbled to remember. Then, I started praying in Latin. I knew a little Latin since high school, and surprisingly enough, it came naturally to me. Pater noster, qui es in caelis. Sanctificatur nomen tuum. Stomp, stomp. Adveniat regnum tuum. Fiat voluntas tua. Sicut in caelo et in terra. Stomp, stomp. I could hear them picking up the pace and running at me. Panem nostrum quotidianum de nobis hodie. Et dimitte nobis debita nostra. Stomp, stomp, and then they stopped right behind me. Sicidit nos de minimis debitoribus nostris. Iene nos inducus in tentationem. I could feel a cold breath down my neck. I could hear faint whispers that I couldn't understand. A witch's cackle is in the distance. Sed liber nos a malo. I yelled, finishing my prayer and throwing all the salt I had left behind me. The whispering stopped. The footsteps stopped. The laughter stopped. The house reverted to its natural state of quietness. Every now and then, I could hear a car driving by, and I could see the headlights gently lighting up the room. I was certain whatever was behind me had vanished, but I never turned around. I never looked. I opened the door to the basement garage, went downstairs, punched in the garage code, and got outside. Once outside, I ran across the street. I contemplated running all the way home, but I glanced over my shoulder at the house. It seemed fine, dark, and quiet. I started sobbing as I called my friend. She didn't reply. I texted her, but still nothing. I stopped going to the house. I figured Boots would only be alone for 2 days at this point, and I left her plenty of dry food. I was too scared of what could happen next. I would just explain it all to my friend, and if she didn't understand, then tough luck. I knew my friend was to land on Sunday at 7 p.m., so I went to the airport and waited for her. "What are you doing here?" she said as soon as she walked through the arrival gates. "Well, I figured you'd need to drive home." "Plus, I need to tell you something," I said, relaying the whole story and showing her the photos I'd taken, even the ones I'd sent to her before. She listened quietly, and when I was done, she stopped dead in her tracks, looked me in the eyes, and grabbed my hands. "Do you think I can stay with you tonight?" she asked softly. "What?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You don't want to see if your cat is okay?" "Andy, these pictures are undeniably from my house, but I don't have a cat," she said, showing me her phone. Our last conversation on her phone was about her thanking me for coming to the party months ago.